Hey there, curious friend. I'm Courtney, a certified peer support specialist, and welcome to Wonderland Unlocked. In this series, Curious Connections, we're diving into the twists and turns of friendships and relationships, exploring trust, growth, and those unexpected moments in between. Because in the world of connections, nothing is ever quite as it seems, but it's always worth unlocking together.
Alice, sweetheart, it's nice to see you. Alice. Alice.
Welcome back to Wonderland Unlocked. And today we're stepping into one of the most difficult and often unspoken experiences, the loss of a friendship. Losing a friend isn't like losing an object, something you can just replace. It's losing a shared history, inside jokes, the version of yourself that existed with them. It's disorienting, like waking up in a wonderland that no longer feels familiar. Today, we're going to explore that loss, the grief that follows, and most importantly, the art of rebuilding both ourselves and our capacity for connection. In Alice in Wonderland, we meet the Mock Turtle, a sorrowful character who spends much of his time reminiscing about the past, mourning the life he once had. He's caught up in a loop of nostalgia, longing for the things that are no longer his reality. His sorrow is almost poetic, dwelling on what was, unable to move forward, as if he's lost a part of himself that he can never reclaim. And honestly, that's what losing a friend can feel like. A deep sadness that lingers. Memories playing on a loop in your head. We often talk about grief in the context of death, but friendship carries a loss of its own, a kind of mourning. Whether it ended with a fight, a gradual drifting apart, or a betrayal, the pain is real. The weight of it settles in your chest, and suddenly, everyday moments, things that once felt small, become reminders of what's missing. The song you used to sing together, the inside jokes only you two understood, the places that now feel different because they were yours. I remember a time when I lost a friend I thought would be in my life forever. The unraveling of our bond wasn't sudden. It was slow, almost unnoticeable at first. It started with fewer texts, postponed plans, conversations that once flowed effortlessly now felt strained. The warmth was gone, replaced by an awkward silence and misunderstandings. And then, one day, it was just over. No big blowout, no dramatic goodbye, just an absence where something important used to be. And I grieved. I replayed our old conversations, questioned every moment that led us to this, wondering if I should have done something differently. And that's the hardest part about losing a friendship. Unlike any other forms of loss, there's often no closure. No funeral, no defined moment where it's acknowledged as over. Sometimes it just fades and you're left trying to make sense of the emptiness. There's no script for how to handle the loss of a friend. The world keeps moving, but you're left carrying a quiet grief that no one else seems to recognize. And then comes the doubt. Did it even matter as much as I thought? Was I the only one holding on? Could I have saved it? Sometimes we never get the answers, and that uncertainty makes it even harder. But here's the thing. When we stay stuck in that sorrow, replaying the past like the Mock Turtle, we become trapped. His lament, while heartfelt, leaves him frozen in time, unable to embrace what is still ahead. And I get it, it's hard to let go of something that once meant so much. But at some point, we have to ask ourselves, are we mourning the friend, or are we mourning the version of ourselves we were when we were with them? Friendship loss isn't just about missing the other person. It's about missing the way we laughed with them, the way we saw the world through their eyes, the version of ourselves that existed in that connection. And when that's gone, it can feel like losing a piece of your own identity. But maybe, just maybe, this kind of loss isn't just about endings. It's about an invitation to rediscover who we are outside of that friendship. Because as painful as it is, loss creates space. Space for reflection, space for growth, space for new connections. The question is, what do I do with that space? And that's what we're going to explore next. Before we can rebuild, we have to acknowledge what we've lost. We live in a world that encourages us to move on quickly, to replace what's missing, to pretend we're fine. The pressure to keep moving forward, to distract ourselves from the pain, can be overwhelming. But the truth is, friendship loss deserves space. It deserves to be felt. There's a moment in Alice in Wonderland when Alice finds herself at the tea party, a place of chaos and confusion. She's surrounded by madness, yet there's something oddly comforting about the noise. The tea keeps flowing, the hats keep spinning, and the characters are unpredictable. But in that chaos, there's still a sense of togetherness. But imagine that scene again, only this time, the table is empty. The tea has gone cold, and the laughter has faded. That's what it feels like when a friendship ends. The spaces they once occupied in your life now feel glaringly vacant. The spots you once served for them, whether it's a seat at the table, a text you send after a long day, or the places you used to go together, now feel unfamiliar, even alien. Their name still lingers at the tip of your tongue when something reminds you of them, but you can't call them anymore. The empty space, once filled with warmth of connection, now echoes with silence. It's that eerie silence that can be the hardest part. You might try to fill it with noise, with distractions, or by reaching out to others, but none of it fills the void in quite the same way. And that's okay, because here's the thing, this part is necessary. You can't skip this stage. You can't rush through it. You have to sit at that empty table for a while. Let yourself feel the ache. Let yourself acknowledge the love that once existed, even if it's no longer there. Because pretending it didn't matter won't make the pain go away. It'll only bury it, and eventually that buried grief will rise again, perhaps in ways you don't expect. I remember trying to ignore my grief, convincing myself that it's just a friendship, not a big deal. But the truth is, friendships shape us in ways we don't always recognize. They become a part of our identity, who we are when we're with them, how we act, how we grow, and what we share. They're the mirrors reflecting our best and worst selves. And when they end, it's not just about losing that person. It's about losing the version of ourselves that existed with them. Sometimes we may find ourselves not only mourning the loss of a person, but mourning the loss of who we were in that friendship. You know, that version of yourself who was lighter, funnier, or more spontaneous because of their presence. That's a tough realization. And there's a deep grief that comes with it, because when a friendship that ends, it can feel like a chapter of your own story has closed. You wonder, who am I without them? That empty table can feel unbearable. It can feel like there's an infinite space where something vital once was, and no amount of time or distraction seems to fill it. There will be moments when the grief hits unexpectedly, when you hear a song you used to sing together or see something that reminds you of their smile. And that sting, oh, that sting, it can make you question everything. I remember the days after my own friendship ended, I couldn't understand why it hurt so much. It wasn't as if I didn't have other people in my life, but this loss felt different. This was someone who had witnessed parts of me that no one else had. The inside jokes, the shared experiences, the unspoken understanding. It felt like a part of my history had been erased. And yet, there I was, sitting at that empty table, wondering how to even begin to rebuild. But you know what? Sitting with the loss is important. It's in these moments of stillness that we learn more about ourselves than we ever would in the chaos. It's in the silence of the empty table that we face our own emotions. And that's when the real healing begins. So if you're in this stage, if the empty table feels unbearable, know that it's okay. It's okay to miss them. It's okay to cry over what was. It's okay to sit in the silence and reflect on what the friendship meant to you. Don't rush through it. Don't rush through you. You're processing. And that takes time. It's a messy, vulnerable process. And it's normal to feel like you're not making progress. The truth is, not moving is often a part of the process too. But eventually, you have to decide. Do you stay at that empty table forever, or do you start clearing the cups and making space for something new? The answer isn't easy, and it doesn't have to be immediate. You can take your time. You can feel the loss for as long as you need to, but when you're ready, when you feel the stirrings of something new, that's when you start to rebuild. It may take a long time, but you'll eventually feel the desire to clear that space and let something else fill it. And let me tell you, there's something beautiful about that moment, because when you clear the cups, when you gently push the table back, you're not just making space for new friendships, you're making space for a whole new version of yourself. In Wonderland, Alice is constantly asked, "Who are you?" It's a question that feels frustrating, even impossible, because she keeps changing. She isn't the same girl who fell down that rabbit hole. The Wonderland that she navigates is full of surprises, and she continuously faced with new versions of herself. It's this dynamic, ever-evolving state of being that makes her journey so relatable. She's constantly growing, adapting, and sometimes losing herself in the process. But the question, "Who are you?" keeps coming back, reminding her that change is inevitable, and that change shapes who we are. And neither are we. After losing a friend, we are changed, whether we like it or not. Sometimes that change feels like an erosion of identity. We wonder who we are without the other person. It can feel like we're left in a void with no clear direction or sense of who we are anymore. But that change doesn't have to be a loss. It can be a rediscovery. It can be the chance to reconnect with parts of ourselves that we may have hidden or put on the back burner. I remember a time when I found myself grappling with this very question, who am I without this friendship? I had spent so much of my time thinking about how my identity was tied to another person that I had forgotten to ask myself who I was outside of that relationship. What parts of me were tied to their presence? Were there things I held back? Ways I shaped myself to fit their expectations? Or even things I suppressed to avoid conflict? It's a hard question to answer, especially when you've been intertwined with someone for a long time. Their influence on you is so persuasive that it becomes difficult to pinpoint where they end and where you begin. But sometimes friendship loss isn't about losing someone. It's about finding out who we are when we're standing on our own. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that may have been overshadowed. It's about confronting the parts of our identity that were built in the response to the dynamic of the relationships, whether those aspects were truly ours or created to fulfill a role we thought we needed to play. It's like standing in the ruins of something familiar and asking yourself what you want to build next. What do you want to carry forward, and what do you want to leave behind? This process can be uncomfortable. There's a certain vulnerability in stripping away the layers we built in relation to someone else, but in that stripping away, there's also freedom. Freedom to be unapologetically yourself, free from the influence of someone else's perception of who you should be. Rebuilding the lost doesn't mean rushing into new friendships to fill the void. It doesn't mean masking the emptiness with distractions or seeking validation from others. It means rediscovering yourself first. It means taking the time to reflect on what you want in future connections, what boundaries you want to set, and what you need from relationships moving forward. It means learning that you are whole, even when a friendship ends. In my own experience, I tried to fill the void left by a friendship with new people, hoping they'd somehow replace what I had lost. But that only deepened my sense of emptiness. I realized that the first thing I needed was to be okay with being alone, to sit with my own company, to reflect on the person I had become without the other person, and to heal from the wounds that had came from that loss. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick. But over time, I started to see that I was not a broken version of myself. I was simply a version of myself who had learned something important about what I needed from a relationship and from myself. And here's where the Mock Turtle lament, despite his deep sorrows, offers such a valuable lesson. We don't have to stay trapped in that place of grief forever. Wonderland itself keeps moving. The seasons change, the characters evolve, and the story moves forward. Similarly, we don't have to remain stuck in the past. We can learn to move forward too, at our own pace. The process of rebuilding, whether that's reclaiming parts of your own identity or forming new connections with others, will take time. But it starts with you. You are allowed to take the time you need to rebuild. You reflect on who you were before the friendship, who you are now, and who you want to become in the future. It's a journey of self-rediscovery, where the pain of loss transforms into the strength of knowing yourself more deeply. And remember, Wonderland isn't a static place. It's constantly evolving, just as you are. You are not meant to stay in one place forever. So as we rebuild, we find out what parts of ourselves still need nurturing, what parts need to be healed, and what parts can be set free to blossom in new ways. And eventually, when you're ready, you'll find that you're not just rebuilding new friendships, you're building a deeper connection within yourself. And that, my friends, is one of the most important things to reclaim after loss. Your connection to who you are, unapologetically and fully. One of the hardest things after losing a friend is believing that new meaningful friendships can still come. The fear of being hurt again and opening up only to lose someone else can be paralyzing. But Wonderland teaches us that just because one tea party ends doesn't mean there won't be another. Not every friendship is meant to last forever. Some come into our lives for a reason to teach us, to help us grow. Others will stay for the long haul, and some friendships, even after they end, will always have a place in our hearts. Rebuilding after loss doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring what was, learning from it, and allowing ourselves to believe in connection again. And if you're grieving the loss of a friendship, know this: you're not alone. Loss is painful, but it is also proof that something meaningful exists. And just as Wonderland keeps shifting, so will your heart. You will find new connections, new joy, and new moments of belonging. All you have to do is be willing to step forward. Friendship loss is painful, but it is not the end of your story. Today we sat with a loss, we honored it, and we began the process of rebuilding. Wherever you are in your journey, know that you're not alone. Thank you for joining me in Wonderland Unlocked. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, take care, and remember, your story is still unfolding.